Welcome to our deep dive. Today we're tackling poststructuralism and discourse analysis. It might sound a bit intimidating, but believe me, it's really fascinating stuff, especially when we think about how it applies to some articles, from that discourse analyzer AI toolkit you gave me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what makes this area so interesting is, you go beyond just what's being said. We're really looking at why and how language functions the way it does. It's almost as if we're putting on special glasses, revealing the hidden power dynamics, assumptions and cultural forces, like in every conversation, every text.
All right, I'm ready for those glasses.
Yeah.
But before we, really jump in, what exactly is discourse analysis? I mean, just to make sure everyone's on the same page.
So at its core, discourse analysis is about how language shapes our understanding of the world. It's not just about dictionary definitions. It's how words are used, in specific contexts by specific people to achieve, specific things. Really helps us see how language constructs reality, not just reflects it,
It's like realizing how we talk about something actually changes how we think about it.
Exactly. That's it. And that's where poststructuralism comes in, takes this, discourse analysis and kind of pushes it even further, challenges that whole idea that meaning is fixed and universal.
Okay, that's intriguing. Tell me more about how poststructuralism shakes things up. How's it different?
So to get poststructuralism, it helps to compare it with what came before, structuralism. Think of structuralism as this big effort to find the underlying structures of language and meaning. It's like a detective searching for clues to solve a mystery, right? Structuralists, they think that if you analyze the structure of language, we can find these universal truths hidden within.
Okay, like a code breaker trying to crack a secret message.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. But then poststructuralism comes in, throws a wrench in the whole thing. It basically says, hold on, meaning isn't fixed. It's not absolute. It's fluid, It's constantly changing, dependent on so many things like context, power dynamics, even our own unconscious biases.
Sure. So you're saying there's no one right answer, no single way to interpret something. It's more of a negotiation, a conversation that keeps evolving.
You got it. And that's what makes poststructuralism so exciting. Forces us to question everything we thought we knew about language and consider just how complex creating and contesting meaning can be.
It sounds like a pretty major shift, from those traditional ways of thinking about language.
Yeah.
A real change.
Yeah, it definitely shook things up in the academic world. And it's had this ripple effect going across so many areas, from literature and media studies to sociology and psychology even.
I know poststructuralism is connected to some pretty big names, people like Derrida, Foucault, Butler. Can you give us a quick rundown of some of the key figures and their, mind-blowing ideas?
Of course. So let's start with Jacques Derrida and his concept of deconstruction. Now, deconstruction isn't about just tearing things down or saying there's no meaning. It's more like carefully taking a text apart, examining its assumptions, contradictions, and, those hidden power dynamics.
So it's like going deeper, looking at the subtext, the unspoken parts of language.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Derrida was saying that, meaning, it's never really fully in the text itself. It's always deferred, meaning it relies on this, whole network of relationships with other texts, ideas, cultural contexts even.
So every sentence, every single word, it's part of this huge conversation, constantly referencing and reinterpreting what came before it.
That's it, exactly. And that's why, deconstruction is so powerful. It helps us see how meaning, how it's, built and challenged, reveals hidden agendas and those power dynamics, that are happening in language.
Okay, so we've got Derrida deconstructing things. What about Michel Foucault? I've heard, he had some pretty radical ideas about power and knowledge.
Oh, Foucault, yeah. He really was a game changer. His argument was that power, it's not just something held by individuals, or institutions. It's woven into the very fabric of society.
Yeah.
And language. Huge part of that. He had this concept of discursive formations, basically these sets of rules and practices that, govern what can be said and thought within a particular area, like knowledge.
It's almost like invisible boundaries,
Yeah.
shaping the whole conversation, telling us what's okay to say, what counts as quote unquote truth, and what, gets silenced or pushed aside.
Exactly. And these formations, they're not neutral, right? They reflect, the power dynamics of the society they're in. Think about how, Medical discourse, it has shaped our understanding of mental illness, right?
Hmm.
Over time, I mean, what was once seen as demonic possession or hysteria, we now understand it so differently, all thanks to those shifts in medical language,
Oh,
and knowledge.
that's a really powerful example. Shows how language doesn't just, describe reality, it creates it. And whoever controls the language, well, they have a lot of influence over how we see the world.
Absolutely. And that's why Foucault is so important for understanding how power works in those subtle, often invisible ways.
Okay, so we've got Derrida breaking down text, Foucault showing us, how power is woven into language. What about Roland Barthes? He's another name that comes up a lot when talking about, post-structuralism.
Barthes, yeah, he was a brilliant mind. He took these post-structuralist ideas and applied them to, well, everything. Popular culture, you name it, analyzed fashion, advertising, even wrestling and food. One of his big ones is the death of the author. It argues that the author's intentions, well, they're basically irrelevant when it comes to, interpreting a text.
Wait, really? You're saying it doesn't matter what the author meant to say?
That's the radical idea behind it, yeah. Barthes has argued that once a text is out there, it kind of takes on a life of its own, becomes open to all these interpretations. The reader, they become the primary, producer of meaning, bringing their own experiences, biases, their cultural background, everything to the table.
Like a text turns into this collaboration between the author and the reader, with the meaning always, changing.
Exactly. And this really challenged, that traditional view, the author as the sole authority on their work.
Wow, this is mind-blowing stuff. And we haven't even gotten to Judith Butler yet.
Oh, Judith Butler, yes. Her work, it's so influential, especially in gender studies. She argues that gender, it's not something we're born with, it's something we perform, through our actions, behaviors, and how we present ourselves to the world.
So it's not about, who you are deep down inside. It's about how you act and how those actions are, seen through the lens of society's expectations.
Exactly. Butler calls it gender performativity. And her argument is that these performances, they're not just personal choices. They're shaped by the power structures and the cultural norms that tell us what's masculine or feminine,
It's a really interesting idea. It challenges that whole, fixed biological idea of gender and presents it as this fluid, dynamic process.
Yeah. And it opens up so many possibilities for how we understand and, express our own gender identities.
Okay, so we've got Derrida with deconstruction, Foucault with power dynamics and language, Barthes challenging the author's authority, and then Butler, rethinking gender as this performance.
Yeah.
Anyone else we need to cover before we, get into how we can actually use all this?
Oh, there are so many fascinating thinkers in this field. But I think one more is worth mentioning, Julia Kristeva and her concept of intertextuality. She says that no text exists on its own. Every single text is in conversation with other texts, drawing on shared cultural knowledge, historical references, literary traditions, all of it.
So it's like every book, every article, even a tweet is part of this giant web of meaning.
Exactly. Think about how, a contemporary novel might reference Shakespeare, or how a speech might echo a historical figure. These intertextual references, they add layers of meaning and complexity, make us see connections, make comparisons.
Wow, it's a lot to process. But I'm already seeing how these post-structuralist ideas can change how we read, interpret, and interact with the world around us. It's eye-opening.
Oh, and we've only just scratched the surface. But before we move on to, applying these theories, I'm curious, what are your thoughts so far? What's grabbing your attention?
I mean, honestly, it's all pretty amazing. What really hits home, though, is that idea that language isn't neutral. It carries power, shapes our perceptions, reflects hidden agendas and assumptions of, well, whoever's using it.
That's a key takeaway. And it's something to keep in mind as we delve into how post-structuralism can help us analyze, those articles you have from the Discourse Analyzer AI toolkit.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how this all plays out in practice. Ready to dive in.
Let's do it. We'll start by looking at how we can apply all of this, to specific examples, from news articles and speeches to even social media posts and everyday conversations. Okay, so we've laid some groundwork. Let's actually put these post-structuralist ideas to work. Look at this article you brought from the Discourse Analyzer AI toolkit. It's all about, going deeper, beyond what's on the surface, to see how language is, how it's being used to shape perspectives and achieve, goals, right?
All right, I'm ready to analyze. Where should we start? Any article that really jumps out at you? That's a good example.
You've got one here about AI's impact on the job market. It's a hot button issue for sure. And the language they use in this article, it says a lot about the anxieties, and the power dynamics at play.
Yeah, I see that. Even the title, AI, job creator or job killer, it's framed like some kind of battle, right?
Yeah.
Clear winners and losers.
Exactly. That's it. Sets up this binary opposition, classic post-structuralist idea. Implies that AI is either going to create jobs or destroy them. No, no middle ground, no complexity.
And that kind of framing, it really impacts how people think about it, right? If all you hear is job killer, I mean, you're going to be worried.
For sure. It taps right into those existing fears, job security, economic instability, all of it. And that's where Foucault's ideas about power and discourse, they become really important. The way we talk about this. In the media, in policy, even just in everyday conversations, it has real consequences.
So the language we use about AI, it's not just reflecting what's happening, it's actively shaping it, affecting public opinion, decisions, even how people plan for their careers.
Precisely. It's not even just about the words themselves. It's about, who's speaking, who has the authority to define the terms of this whole debate, and whose voices are, being left out.
Okay, I'm seeing how post-structuralism can help us unpack all of this.
Yeah.
Any specific parts of this article that stand out to you?
There's a section where they quote a CEO of a tech company saying that AI will, and I quote, create more jobs than it destroys. Now, at first glance, that might sound reassuring. But if we use a little deconstruction, we can see what's behind that statement, the assumptions,
I'm all ears. How would deconstruct that quote? Break it down.
Well, first think about the speaker. A CEO of a tech company, they have, a vested interest, right, in making AI sound good. They're likely to benefit financially from all this, so their perspective, it's inherently biased.
Right. Their position, their power shapes their message. Not necessarily that they're, lying, but they're coming from a specific place.
Yeah.
With, their own interests.
That's it. And then there's the language itself. Create more jobs than it destroys. It's like this simple equation, a balance sheet. Jobs lost, jobs gained, easy to measure.
But it's way more complicated than that.
Yeah.
Right? The kinds of jobs created, they might be totally different from the ones lost. And how this affects people, individual workers, communities, you can't just put a number on that.
Absolutely. So even if that quote sounds, objective, reassuring even, it's actually full of assumptions. And those power dynamics we talked about, they need to be, untacked, examined.
This is so fascinating. It's like learning to read between the lines, seeing how language is used in these subtle ways to change how we think.
And that's just one tiny example from one article. Imagine this applied to all the news you see, the social media, the conversations you have every day.
Yeah, it's kind of overwhelming to think about, right? How much information we're constantly getting.
Yeah.
And how much of it is, shaped by these forces we don't even see.
It can be a lot. But that's why post-structuralism is so valuable. It gives us the tools to be, more critical of the information we're getting, to question what we're told, and to challenge those dominant narratives that shape our world.
Okay, so we looked at how this can help us analyze, this AI job market article. What about some of the other ones from the toolkit? Anything else we should look at?
You have one here about climate change. That one's really interesting. It looks at how different groups, scientists, policymakers, activists, even corporations, how they're all using language to frame this issue and, push their agendas.
Climate change. I mean, that's such a complicated issue.
Yeah.
So much debate. I can only imagine what post-structuralist analysis could reveal.
Oh, it's a gold mine. You've got scientists using very specific language, technical terms, presenting data, evidence. Then you have activists using really emotionally charged language to raise awareness, call people to action. And corporations, they're using carefully crafted language to downplay, their role in the problem or to promote those greenwashing initiatives.
I feel like everyone's speaking a different language,
Yeah.
right? Even though they're talking about the same thing. No wonder it's so hard to agree to make real progress.
And that's where Barthes' ideas about mythologies, they become really helpful. He argued that even seemingly innocent things, cultural phenomena, ad slogans, popular songs, they can all carry powerful ideologies.
So those images we see, polar bears on melting ice or slogans like Save the Planet, it's not just neutral messaging. It's part of a bigger story, a mythology that shapes how we think and feel about climate change.
Exactly. And those mythologies, they can be so persuasive, even when they're oversimplifying things, or pushing specific agendas.
I'm starting to see how all these post-structuralist ideas work together. Deconstruction. It helps us, see the assumptions hidden in the language. Foucault, he shows us how power shapes the whole discourse. And Barthes, he helps us see those ideological messages hidden in plain sight.
And don't forget Kristeva and intertextuality. When we analyze, climate change language, we got to remember it's building on what came before, all the past discussions, scientific reports, debates, cultural narratives.
It's like everything we say is part of this ongoing conversation, building on what came before, shaping what comes next. It's a lot.
It is. But that's the beauty of discourse analysis,
Yeah.
It helps us see how language, culture, power, it's all connected.
Okay, we've looked at AI, climate change. What about that article about gender in the media, the one you mentioned?
That's a perfect one to look at through the lens of Judith Butler's work, gender performativity. The article, it analyzes how female characters are shown in movies and TV, right? We could use Butler's ideas to see how those portrayals, do they reinforce traditional gender norms or do they challenge them?
So we could look at, like, how they dress, how they talk, how they interact with men, and how all those choices reflect or maybe subvert what society expects from women.
Exactly. We could even see how those portrayals have changed over time, how they reflect evolving attitudes towards gender, roles, identity, all that.
It's like holding up a mirror to society, right?
Hey.
Using media to see how we understand and perform gender.
Yeah, precisely. And using Butler's ideas, we can go beyond just saying, is this portrayal good or bad? We can analyze how it contributes to the larger conversation about gender and representation.
This is really eye-opening. I feel like I'm seeing the world differently now. But I gotta admit, it's a little overwhelming thinking about applying all these ideas to everything, every bit of information we come across.
I get it. It's not about memorizing every single theory. It's about developing a critical awareness, how language shapes us, our perceptions, our experiences.
So it's more about a mindset, right? Approaching
Yeah.
things with a healthy bit of skepticism.
Yeah.
And a willingness to question, what we're being told.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that language, it's not just this neutral tool, for communication. It's powerful. It can inform, it can persuade, it can manipulate, even control.
This deep dive has been amazing, really insightful. I feel like I have this whole new understanding now, how language works, how it shapes everything. But I'm still curious, what do we do with this? How do we go beyond analyzing and actually make a difference?
That's the big question. And it's what we'll explore in the next part. We'll talk about how these post-structuralist insights, they can, help us become better thinkers, communicators, more engaged citizens even.
It's really amazing. We've uncovered how post-structuralism helps us see, like, the hidden workings of language. It's as if we've been given this backstage pass, seeing all the tricks and the mechanics that create the illusion. But what do we actually do with this knowledge? How does it change, like, how we live in the world?
That's the exciting part, right? It's not just about, taking things apart. It's about being more aware, more deliberate in how we use language. We can shape our own narratives. We can challenge the ones that are harmful, advocate for better ways of communicating, more just, more equitable ways.
So we're not just, like, passively taking in language anymore. We're actually, like, shaping the conversation, influencing how meaning is made.
Yeah, exactly. Think about those articles from the toolkit. Now that you're aware of, the power dynamics, the assumptions hidden in the language, you can read them differently. You can question the narratives, see whose voices are missing, and even offer different perspectives, your own take.
It's like we've got this superpower now to see through the illusions, to deconstruct those dominant narratives that we usually just accept.
And of course, with great power comes great responsibility, right? We have to use this understanding in an ethical way to promote dialogue, to encourage understanding, empathy.
Yeah.
You know,
So it's not about, like, tearing everything down. It's about building something better, something new, creating those more inclusive, more nuanced ways of talking to each other.
absolutely. Post-structuralism gives us the tools to, challenge stereotypes, those assumptions about identity, to fight for greater representation and diversity in all forms of discourse.
I love that. It's not about, finding the one right answer or forcing one single interpretation. It's about opening up the conversation,
Yeah.
allowing for different viewpoints, recognizing that, meaning making it's complex.
And it's about being aware of our own language choices.
Yeah.
How are we framing things? Whose voices are we, putting front and center or pushing aside? Are we promoting understanding? Or are we, unintentionally reinforcing harmful stereotypes?
It's like this constant self-reflection, right? Always trying to communicate in a way that's thoughtful and ethical.
And remember, it's not about being perfect. We're all going to mess up sometimes. Use language in ways we didn't mean to, or fall into those unconscious biases.
The important thing is being open to learning, being challenged, and always trying to understand how language works, better and better.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's a journey, not a destination. And the more we engage with these ideas, the better we become at navigating this amazing world of language.
This has been an incredible deep dive, really. I feel like I've gained a whole new understanding of how language, it shapes us, our perceptions, our beliefs, even who we are.
And I hope you feel, empowered to use this understanding to make a real difference in your own life and in the world around you.
To wrap up, I want to leave you with a challenge. As you go about your day, pay attention to the language you see.
Mm-hmm.
In the news, on social media, in your conversations, notice how language is being used, to persuade, to shape how you see things, to reinforce those power dynamics we talked about.
Don't be afraid to ask questions, challenge assumptions, offer different perspectives. Remember, language is powerful, and we all have a role in shaping how it's used.
Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey into the world of poststructuralism and discourse analysis. We hope you've, learned something, and that you're inspired to keep exploring this amazing relationship between language, meaning, and power.